This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. A landmark meeting in Seoul between the foreign ministers of South Korea and Ukraine addressing the fate of North Korean troops fighting for Russia and post-war reconstruction. Meantime, Saudi Arabia's top diplomat heads to China for talks with his counterpart Wang Yi as both sides seek closer cooperation on trade, investment and regional security. Also, China's military and Coast Guard conduct combat-readiness patrols around Scarborough Shoal as part of efforts to step up operations in an area also claimed by the Philippines. And the yen slides to a 40-year low, but Japan isn't changing its message as markets watch for signs of intervention. Also tonight, as Beijing prepares to mark the 105th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China, we look at the challenges of modernizing Asia's largest economy in an increasingly turbulent world. Plus, hostile fans hurl insults at South Korea's football team, returning home after a disappointing World Cup outing. South Korea and Ukraine shoring up ties as their foreign ministers meet. Seoul says that there has been constructive talks about the fate of two North Korean soldiers captured while fighting in Russia. South Korea is seeking their transfer on the grounds that they are citizens of a single Republic of Korea envisaged in its constitution. Pyongyang and Moscow have demanded the repatriation of the pair, but rights groups and experts warn that they could face severe punishment if returned to the north. Now, these talks come as the war between Russia and Ukraine rages on, with Kyiv in recent months stepping up its long-range campaign against Moscow, targeting Russian energy infrastructure in particular. President Vladimir Putin has acknowledged fuel shortages in Russia and has rejected what he described as a Ukrainian call to scale back hostilities. Now, talks in Seoul also covered post-war reconstruction in Ukraine. Since the war started, South Korea has provided Kyiv with billions in humanitarian and financial aid, as well as non-lethal military supplies. Saudi Arabia's top diplomat has arrived in Beijing for a two-day official visit as uncertainty lingers over U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiations. Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan has met with China's Vice President Han Zheng, where they exchanged views on regional and international developments. The top Saudi diplomat stressed the importance of mutual trust and the shared vision between Riyadh and Beijing. Now, he's also due to meet with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and other senior officials for talks. And for Crystal Chia joining us live from Shanghai to unpack this for us. Now, Crystal, first up, what do you think are some of the likely outcomes for this visit by the top Saudi diplomat to China?
So we haven't had any official lines yet, but Saudi Arabia has said that the meeting will focus on strengthening relations as well as discussions about the international environment. Now, earlier in March, the two leaders had a call where they said that they would want to see peace in the Middle East and that they would up coordination and communication efforts, hence leading to this visit. So earlier today, we spoke to an analyst focused on the Middle East, and he said that beyond the war, we can be looking forward to other topics, for example, investments in technology and artificial intelligence.
There is one fundamental issue that we have to see what happens when we go forward. Last year, the Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, essentially focused their technological development, their investments in artificial intelligence and other technologies on the United States. When Donald Trump visited the Gulf in May of last year, he walked away with a stunning $3.6 trillion in pledged investments, stronger even, both the UAE and Saudi Arabia agreed to reduce their technology cooperation with China and focus on their cooperation with the United States. We're going to have to see how, in the wake of the Iran war, whether that still stands or whether the Gulf states are going to look for greater diversity.
So, Crystal, do we know what's at stake for Beijing as well as its diplomatic ambitions in the Gulf?
So Mr. Dorsey said that Beijing actually doesn't have much of a diplomatic role in the region and that our relations are more of an economic one. Let's look at oil. Now, China is the world's largest buyer of crude oil. 40% of that is from Saudi Arabia. And though volumes have been at a record low, elevated prices have kept demand as well as shipping disruptions. So what does all this mean for China? Now, so far, China, compared with its other Asian peers, have been less disrupted by the energy crisis because it has a substantial volume of reserves as well as a deep focus on renewables. But it will still want the situation in the Gulf to remain stable. Now, further disruptions could affect prices, complicate shipping matters, and reinforce Chinese concerns over maritime dependence. Now, beyond the war, let's look at Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. That's the country's long-term strategy to diversify away from oil, heading into other sectors such as manufacturing, technology, and defense. All these industries that China is expanding its presence in. So this has raised concern from the U.S., from both the Biden and Trump administrations. So for this visit, analysts are saying that for Saudi Arabia, it represents its broader strategy to diversify its diplomatic relations away from its very heavy traditional reliance with the United States.
Well, thanks for unpacking China-Saudi relations for us. Crystal Chia speaking to us live from Shanghai. Now, a fresh diplomatic push for peace between the U.S. and Iran taking shape in Doha. U.S. and Iranian officials reportedly set to meet in the Qatari capital for the next stage of talks to end their war. But Tehran insists no formal negotiations have been planned. Its foreign ministry saying that the Iranian delegation's visit has no relation to that of their American counterparts. Reports also say that technical teams from both sides could meet separately with Qatari and Pakistani mediators tomorrow. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump says that lead negotiator Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner are already there, with efforts focused on securing Iran's commitment to abandon its nuclear weapons ambitions. Meanwhile, Iran says that it has reached a common understanding with Oman on managing the Strait of Hormuz. Its deputy foreign minister says that technical teams will begin work within a week on shipping routes and operational arrangements. He says that Oman supports charging vessels for services in the waterway. Muscat has denied backing any transit fees. Now, there are also signs maritime traffic is recovering. South Korea says all but 2 of its vessels have now cleared the waterway. 26 South Korean-linked ships had been stranded in the Strait of Hormuz since the conflict began in late February. More than 100 vessels were escorted out last week under an International Maritime Organization-led operation before renewed fighting forced a mission to pause. Now, Nick Harper, who has been tracking developments for CNA, sheds light on the positions of the opposing sides amid uncertainty over those talks in Doha.
There is a startling lack of clarity about what could potentially happen over the next 24 hours. And part of the problem is the different narrative. The US saying that the talks are on, Iran saying that they have no plans to meet with the United States during the course of this week. So what do we know? Well, we know from the US side who's traveling. That's the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, along with Steve Witkoff, who's been integral in a number of different peace negotiations over the last year and a half. They are traveling to Doha. Donald Trump has said that. However, the Iranians are saying that they will be taking part in separate talks this week, technical talks. They said that bear no relation to the Americans' visit. From the Iranian point of view, they say their priority is really making sure that the initial memorandum of understanding is kept to before they move to this next phase of negotiations. And remember, part of that initial memorandum of understanding was all about ending hostilities. But over the course of the last few days, we've seen once again that flare-up between the US and Iran, firing on one another and against US bases within the region. Some of the things that they will likely try and discuss, if they get around the table, or at least pass messages between those intermediaries, could be trying to end hostilities once and for all, trying to keep the Strait of Hormuz open without any restrictions, without the Iranians saying that they're putting tolls in place or firing on commercial vessels. And on top of that, then trying to move on to the much thornier issue of the nuclear facilities within Iran. What happens to the enriched uranium? How do they close down the facilities successfully? A whole host of things that they need to get to. And bear in mind that it is that 60-day window that they're trying to get this done in. And the clock is ticking. We're already a week or so through that. So they have to get a move on. And I think the problem is at this stage, if they are saying that they're not meeting, it'll be very difficult to get much of that done.
So the question here is, will U.S.-Iran talks bring about new trade routes for India and China? Well, experts say that the deal reopens the possibility of new routes, supplies, and strategic options for Asia. Well, do read more on our website, cna.asia, and get the latest on our mobile app. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China's factories are showing signs of life again, but are deeper economic problems still weighing on growth? Plus, the world's first caviar company to go public is riding China's growing dominance in global caviar production. More on that story next. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia Tonight. Well, it is now time for Olivia to bring us all up to speed with the very latest in business news. So, Liv, all eyes are apparently on the Bank of Japan because the yen is back under pressure. Tell us more about that.
That's right, Oteli. So the yen currency is back in focus. It is testing policymakers' resolve once again. Currency traders are on an intervention alert after the Japanese yen hit a historic 40-year low against the U.S. dollar. It slid to almost 162, its weakest level since 1986. And the depreciation is amid bets that the U.S. Fed will hike interest rates next month, which would further widen the policy gap with the Bank of Japan. Finance Minister Satsuki Katayama reiterated that authorities stand ready to act in the foreign exchange market, repeating language that officials have used consistently. A persistently weak yen is pushing up Japan's import costs and adding to inflation as Middle East tensions keep energy prices volatile. But the weaker currency also boosts the overseas earnings of Japanese exporters when converted back into yen. Well, experts say that the lack of intervention is fueling speculation that Tokyo is willing to tolerate a weaker yen than in the past. Earlier today, we spoke to Jesper Cole of the Monex Group, who believes that Japanese policymakers are likely to stay cautious despite persistent inflation.
The Bank of Japan is very, very clear that they want to be very modest in their rate increases. They are still worried about destroying too much of demand. So from that perspective, yes, we will see further interest rate increases. But the question, will you get real interest rates? So the policy rate minus the inflation rate, will real interest rates actually go into positive territory? For that, they would have to double interest rates to at least 2%. And that, I think, is very unlikely to happen over the next 12 to 15 months. The dirty secret is that the weak yen is great for Japanese corporations. For every 10 yen of yen weakness, Japanese companies get a windfall extra profit of around 8 percentage points. But as you point out, the weak yen is bad for the purchasing power of Mr. and Mrs. Watanabe. Takaichi, what does she think? I think at the end of the day, she wants strong Japanese corporations because she knows that at the end of the day, a strong Japan is going to come from strong corporate Japan rather than from a strong consumer.
China's factory activity picked up this month, providing a much-needed boost to authorities as Beijing battles to revive the domestic economy. Official PMI hit 50.3 versus 50 in May, topping market estimates. The PMI figures are among the first indications of how the economy fared at the end of the second quarter. The manufacturing sector has faced uncertainty this year from the war in the Middle East, which has driven up global energy prices. The headwinds add to existing challenges in the world's second-largest economy, including lackluster household spending and a years-long debt crisis in the vast property sector. Experts say that while the economy has regained some momentum lately, it remains heavily dependent on exports and AI-related tech. Well, it's been a mixed bag of trade for the Greater China indices, with mainland benchmarks ending in positive territory. Shenzhen there bagging more than 2.4%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng, though, finished underwater but managed to trim back some of its earlier losses. In China, smartphone makers are sharply cutting production targets by up to 30% as component shortages and rising costs continue to squeeze the industry. Reports say Xiaomi has cut its 2026 smartphone shipment target to about 95 million units, down from an earlier forecast of 135 million. Oppo and Vivo also have lowered their targets to below 90 million units, while Honor says it may struggle to maintain its growth. And suppliers say that demand for memory chips and other key components is being diverted to the booming AI sector, driving up costs and tightening supplies. Industry executives say that many brands are finding it difficult to pass those higher costs on to consumers, especially in the budget and the mid-range markets. Research firms now expect the global smartphone market to shrink by about 14% this year, with Android brands forecast to see even steeper declines as supply constraints persist. The European Union and China have agreed to work towards resolving their trade disputes by October as tensions grow over Chinese exports and market access. The agreement follows marathon talks in Brussels between EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič and Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Yi. Both sides agreed to set up a mechanism to monitor trade flows and detect sudden surges in Chinese imports.
So we are today launching trade and investment consultations, a dedicated platform to tackle in a structured way the issues we have identified together along four strands: trade and investment balancing, export controls, intellectual property rights, and WTO reform.
The EU says subsidized Chinese products, including EVs and other manufactured goods, are flooding the European market, contributing to a trade deficit of more than $400 billion last year. Beijing has repeatedly rejected allegations that subsidies give Chinese companies a competitive advantage and has warned of retaliating against EU measures. Taiwanese authorities raided Supermicro's offices as part of a probe into alleged illegal exports of its AI servers. Prosecutors also raided data center operator Chief Telecom and Supermicro distributor Albatron. Shares of Supermicro tumbled 8% overnight in New York. Albatron also plunged nearly 10% in Taipei, while Chief Telecom lost around 1.5%. Both companies say they are cooperating with investigators. Authorities made their first known arrests in May over the alleged smuggling of NVIDIA chips using Supermicro servers. Now, the operation follows a series of crackdowns on illicit tech distribution across Asia. Last Friday, Malaysian authorities foiled an attempt to smuggle nearly $13 million worth of advanced AI chips through the country's main airport. In February, Singapore charged 3 men with fraud involving a server supplier after authorities raided 22 locations. Magnificent Seven stocks have erased $2.3 trillion in market value amid a tech sell-off and fears over stretched valuations. It is setting the group on course for its worst month in more than a year. It includes NVIDIA, Meta, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, and Tesla, which have shed a median 9% over this month. The biggest drag came from Microsoft, which is down at 13.4%. Meta and Amazon also down by double-digit percentage losses. Margins are tightening as the cost of the components rise due to the impact of global trade tariffs and clamp down on tech exports. Now, the market rotation comes as investors grow increasingly concerned about profit returns as industry's hyperscalers continue to pledge massive spending commitments. Meantime, top Asian chip makers are in the green today. Samsung up 3.4%, SK Hynix 0.8% higher. Both South Korean tech giants clawing back some of yesterday's losses. And Taiwan's TSMC also making gain of 5.2%. Analysts, however, warn that tech trade sentiment remains volatile despite the rush to pick up bargains amid the sell-off. Still, money continues to flow into the advanced tech sector. Samsung and SK Hynix are making one of the biggest bets yet on the AI boom, with investments worth hundreds of billions of dollars in the country's semiconductor push. China has made history with the world's first Caviar to go public. A stellar debut in Hong Kong today for Hangzhou-based Xunlong Sci-Tech, best known for its Kaluga Queen brand. It ended the session more than 50% above its IPO price, and that is after raising about $153 million in initial offering. And the company alone produces more than a third of the world's sturgeon roe, with around 36% market share. Now, China, as a nation, accounted for more than half of global caviar production last year. That number is expected to grow to around 60% by 2030. Now, most of Xunlong's revenue comes from export markets, including Germany, France, the US, Japan, and Singapore. The listing marks the company's fifth IPO attempt since 2011. Previous bids were rejected over concerns about its business structure and overseas revenue. There were also financial controversies that the company said were later resolved. And that's all the wrap in business I have for you today. I'll tell you back to you.
Thanks so very much for that, Olivia. Well, on that note, let's go for a short break now. But coming up next, China steps up its military and coast guard at the contested Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. Plus, Japan's Prime Minister to visit India with energy security, as well as China expected to top the agenda. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Currency traders are on intervention watch after the Japanese yen sank to a 40-year low against the US dollar. The Japanese finance minister today reiterating that authorities stand ready to act. A landmark meeting in South Korea, Seoul and Kyiv discussed the fate of two captured North Korean soldiers fighting in Russia, as well as plans for Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. And Saudi Arabia's top diplomat is in China for talks with his counterpart, as both sides seek closer cooperation on trade, investment, and regional security. China and Saudi Arabia have worked to upgrade their partnership in recent years, stepping up political, economic, and defense cooperation. Well, they are vital partners for each other. Saudi Arabia supplies oil, and China provides technology and invests in infrastructure across the kingdom. Bilateral trade tops $100 billion annually. Although crude exports have dropped in recent months, Saudi Arabia remains China's top supplier of crude oil in the Middle East. Well, China is the kingdom's largest single buyer. Now, over the past decade, Sino-Saudi cooperation has seen Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 economic diversification plan aligned with China's Belt and Road Initiative. And this has resulted in multi-billion-dollar investment projects spanning energy, advanced technology, and logistics. Now, China has also played peacemaker for Saudi Arabia. It helped to broker that landmark Iran-Saudi Arabia agreement back in 2023, restoring diplomatic ties between the two nations. Now, Beijing's role in facilitating that deal elevated its diplomatic profile in the region. And earlier, my colleague Grace Shin spoke to James Dorsey, adjunct senior fellow at S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University. And he explains why the Saudi foreign minister's visit is significant.
This visit is about the Strait of Hormuz, first and foremost. We'll see whether the talks go forward today in Doha, as announced by the Americans. The Iranians have not confirmed that yet. But fact of the matter is that Iran has at least what you could call negative control of the Strait of Hormuz. That means that at any given point, it can interdict shipping. It can weaponize the transit through the passageway and therefore affect not only the Gulf, but also the global energy markets. What we've seen in the last few days is a widely differing interpretation of the Memorandum of Understanding that the United States and Iran agreed on. That memorandum says that it's up to Iran to manage the traffic without the levying of any fees over the next 60 days. Iran interprets that as it has license to control the strait, even though it has to share that with Oman, but has not really publicly in the last few days recognized Oman's rights. While on the other hand, the United States says it's an international waterway through which passage has to be unfettered and uninhibited.
Right. So we understand that the truce at the moment stands very fragile with the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, but nonetheless, China does depend heavily on Gulf oil. So what role do you think Beijing can actually play, and what can it bring it on the table when it meets the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia?
Well, China until now has played really a backbench role. It's had one great success or significant success in mediating in Middle East conflicts, and that was in helping Saudi Arabia and Iran to reestablish diplomatic relations, which were broken off in 2016. On the other hand, what China's assets primarily is its relationship with Iran. It is Iran's foremost oil customer. It has given Iran diplomatic cover repeatedly, certainly in this conflict in the United Nations Security Council. But the notion that Iran will simply do what China wants it to do is an overstatement. So it can pressure Iran. What Iran does with that is a different question.
And as you mentioned, China did help broker the restoration of diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That was back in 2023. Since then, how has that shaped Beijing's diplomatic role generally in the Gulf?
Essentially, China doesn't have a major diplomatic role. The question is whether it wants at least at this point, a major diplomatic role. China's relations with the Gulf are first and foremost economic and trade. There's been military cooperation. China's first ever overseas military industrial manufacturing facility is in Saudi Arabia for the production of drones. There have been some military sales, but fact of the matter is the dominant military and diplomatic player in the Middle East and in the Gulf, first and foremost, is the United States.
In other news, China says that its military and Coast Guard have patrolled the waters around Scarborough Shoal, which is a disputed region in the South China Sea. The Chinese naval and air forces conducted combat readiness patrols in what Beijing considers to be its territorial waters and airspace. Now, the Coast Guard also says that it held law enforcement patrols in the area and has stepped up operations there this month. It added that it had regulated ships involved in what it called illegal rights violation activities, but did not give details. The Scarborough Shoal is claimed by both China and the Philippines and remains one of the region's most contested maritime sites. The Philippines has yet to comment on the Chinese patrol, which comes after the U.S. and the Philippines held joint drills near the shoal over the weekend. Washington says that those exercises were meant to support a free and open Indo-Pacific. China has previously accused Manila of bringing in outside countries for patrols, saying that it undermined regional stability. Tensions around the shoal have grown in recent years, with the Philippines objecting to China's creation of a national nature reserve there as a pretext to strengthen its control. Well, South Korea, meantime, says that its Marines will soon wrap up nearly 2 weeks of multinational joint exercises in the Philippines, aimed at boosting its ability to operate with foreign troops. The Kamandag exercise, which translates to venom or poison in Tagalog, concludes on Wednesday. Together with troops from the U.S. and Japan, they established a joint command and control center to simulate battlefield scenarios. South Korean Marines also shared expertise on operating and maintaining amphibious assault vehicles with their Filipino counterparts. Now, the Philippines fielded 8 such armored vehicles since 2016. Launched in 2017, the exercise brings together nations to strengthen coastal defense and counter-terrorism abilities. South Korea has taken part in the exercise annually since 2022. Now, Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi is heading to New Delhi this week. Tokyo says that the visit will mark a new chapter in ties. Neha Punia files this report for CNA.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Japan's leader Takaichi have met at least twice in the last year. The first time at the sidelines of the G20 summit in South Africa and more recently at the G7 summit in France. But this is Ms. Takaichi's first visit to New Delhi. Indian officials say the 3-day visit is an opportunity to, quote, review and strengthen bilateral cooperation. The two leaders will discuss, they say, common concerns surrounding regional and international issues, and top of the agenda is energy cooperation. New Delhi and Tokyo have both been impacted by the prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which has hit the import of liquefied natural gas, which is why reports are suggesting the leaders could announce a joint task force for cooperation in stockpiling liquefied natural gas. This is being pegged as a way to work together to prepare for future risks of supply disruptions. There's also talk of the two sides announcing a framework to promote vehicles that run on biogas. This will involve Japan's Suzuki Motors, a key player in the Indian market. Now, India is one of the world's largest crude oil importers, and this could be a crucial way to help reduce its import bill, which has ballooned in the last few months.
India, therefore, I'm sure the way it is going is seeking to have some kind of a technical collaboration through which India can learn about or be able to successfully transfer its energy basket into a more diversified form. If you look at any kind of such collaborations that we've talked about, usually a task force is set up. The idea of a task force is to see where the convergences are and what kind of convergences can be achieved. And I think this is the first step.
China and ways to counter its dominance will be another big focus for the Japanese Prime Minister. Ms. Takaichi's government has in the past called Beijing the greatest threat for Tokyo. India has recently reset its own ties with China following years of tensions over a deadly border clash in 2020. Now, while politically both Beijing and New Delhi have signaled that they are ready to move on, the border issue remains unresolved. And as America's interest in the Indo-Pacific diminishes, experts say Tokyo will be counting on New Delhi's cooperation on this front.
It will often not be so overtly stated, but it would figure in very many ways because it's a kind of a country that both of us are facing concerns and issues not only with respect to strategic calculations, but also with respect to economic security.
Apart from security, there will also be a very big emphasis on economic ties. A 50-member strong business delegation is traveling with the Japanese Prime Minister, including Suzuki Motor President Toshihiro Suzuki, as well as other senior executives from the business industry there. And at the forum, Ms. Takaichi is expected to announce Japanese private sector investments worth 10 trillion yen in India over the next decade, according to reports. For CNA, I'm Neha Punia in New Delhi.
A self-exiled Chinese billionaire, he's been sentenced to 30 years in a U.S. prison for scamming more than $550 million from his online followers. Now, a U.S. judge says that Wang Yi preyed on people who hoped for a democratic China, but dedicated himself to increasing his own wealth from 2018 to 2023. The court says that to this day, Guo takes no responsibility for his actions. He maintains that his conduct caused no loss and harmed nobody. Guo has been convicted of 9 of 12 criminal charges. He says he intends to appeal the conviction. His lawyer argues the funds were used for political purposes. Now, the business tycoon was once believed to be among China's wealthiest, amassing his fortune as a property developer. But he fled China a decade ago, alleging political persecution, and reinvented himself as a US-based Communist Party critic. He developed ties with other dissidents and China hawks, including Steve Bannon, a former advisor to President Trump. Tomorrow marks the 105th founding anniversary of the Communist Party of China. And Chinese President Xi Jinping is set to speak at a gathering in Beijing to mark the milestone. He will also hand out the July 1st Medal, the party's highest honor to model members. Well, state media reported that there were more than 101 million party members as of last year, an increase of 1% compared to the year before. Although the rate of membership growth has slowed over the years, 5 years after celebrating its centenary, analysts say the party is entering a different phase, with the anniversary expected to reinforce the party's message that it remains central to China's future. CNA's Rebecca Mateo with more.
5 years ago at Beijing's Tiananmen Square, Chinese President Xi Jinping used the party's 100th anniversary celebrations to declare that China had achieved its first centenary goal, building a moderately prosperous society after eradicating absolute poverty. He also hailed the party's role in national rejuvenation and warned that no foreign force could bully the Chinese people. 5 years later, analysts say the party is governing in a more complex environment. Beyond celebrating past achievements, they say the focus is also on how the party intends to lead China through its next stage of development, a journey President Xi recently described during an inspection tour in Shandong as a new long march.
The party founded this state. But in today's high-quality development with the Chinese modernization, so we need the self-reform, we need the party building to make sure the high-quality development of the Chinese modernization can still be led by the Communist Party of China.
Part of that next stage begins with China's new 15th five-year plan, placing innovation, high-quality growth, and technological self-reliance at the center of the country's development strategy. All this amid a challenging external environment. But analysts say achieving those ambitions isn't just about policies, it's also about strengthening the party itself.
Party building means, first, you need disciplines, you need culture, and also you need the capacity building of the members of the Communist Party, and particularly for the high-ranking officials.
Observers say that emphasis on party building has gone hand in hand with President Xi's anti-corruption campaign. The military has remained a key focus.
So how to continuously improve the party's governance and how to answer to the demand from the public, especially in a new era of aging population, rising youth unemployment, and also suppressing personal income. That would be the number one headache for the ruling party. And also the fight against corruption is also a difficult task.
The anniversary comes a year before the next party congress, where a new leadership lineup will be appointed for a 5-year term. While specific personnel announcements are unlikely on this occasion, analysts tell me that anniversary celebrations could offer early clues about the party's priorities and the type of individuals it wants to recognize. President Xi is to award the July 1st medal to model members, the party's highest honor.
Many of these areas could be the areas where rising stars or dark horses could emerge. For the 20th Party Congress, we see a large number of people with military, industrial backgrounds and tech backgrounds entering the Politburo. So for the next Congress, I do think that there will still be a number of people with such backgrounds, with tech backgrounds, to enter the highest level mechanism, because this complies with the party's new policy directions.
And so, while the anniversary may be rooted in the party's history, attention will also be on the signals it sends about the party's future. Rebecca Mateo, CNA, Beijing.
Time now for another break, but coming up on East Asia Tonight. Heartbreak in Tokyo as Japan crashes out of the World Cup after Brazil snatches a dramatic last-minute winner. Well, it's not a good thing to be a South Korean national footballer right now, because the team was greeted with boos and insults even when they arrived home following an early exit from the World Cup. Well, you can hear the jeers there. Hundreds of fans confronting the returning team at Incheon Airport to vent their frustration. Former head coach Hong Myung-bo, who stepped down after the team's group stage exit, had to be escorted through the terminal. South Korea finished third in Group A after back-to-back defeats to Mexico and South Africa, and were not among the 8 best third-placed teams that reached the knockout round. The Taeguk Warriors' dismal World Cup outing also drew criticism from the South Korean president. Lee Jae-myung apologized to fans, calling the outcome unacceptable, blaming the incompetence of people appointed to leadership positions. Well, it was a heartbreak as well for Japan, as the outside favorites touted to go far fall 1-2 to Brazil. Fans left in tears after Brazil scored a dramatic last-minute goal to seal the fate of the Samurai Blue, denying Japan its first World Cup knockout stage win. But supporters remain hopeful.
最終的に最後1点取られてはしまったんですけれども、もう本当にみんなで守り切って取られた1点だったんで、本当に仕方ないという言い方はあれですけど、悔しいんですけど、そこを本当次の4年後に向けてしっかりまたさらにレベルアップして次につなげてほしいなと思います。
やっぱりどんなピンチの時も諦めずに戦い抜く姿を見て、私も何があってもこれからも挑戦し続けたいなというふうに感じたので、本当にありがとうございます。
Well, for the Japanese community in Brazil, the world's largest outside of Japan, the result was somewhat bittersweet.
Meu coração estava dividido e eu, como brasileiro, torci bastante. O Brasil, lógico. Mas como o Japão saiu na frente, eu falei que vença o melhor. Mas vamos que vamos, Brasil!
Well, fans and players at the World Cup are certainly feeling the heat on and off the pitch. Well, as knockout stages progress, a spell of hotter weather is expected across parts of host countries, US and Canada, in the coming days. Well, the region is set to experience a weather phenomenon known as a heat dome that could push temperatures to dangerous highs between 40 and 46 degrees Celsius through the weekend. Well, several U.S. host cities, including Boston, Philadelphia, and Kansas City, all of which have open-air stadiums, are likely to see above-average temperatures. FIFA has not said whether additional measures will be introduced to protect players and fans during the extreme heat. This year's World Cup already mandates a 3-minute hydration break in each half of every match. Meanwhile, stadiums in Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston have retractable roofs and air conditioning that will offer some respite from the heat. Now, the heat wave in Europe and the high temperatures set to hit parts of the U.S. and Canada in the coming days has been linked to a weather effect known as a heat dome. They are caused when a large, persistent, high-pressure system forms above a region, trapping heat and humidity. Now, the heavy warm air sinks downwards, causing temperatures to rise. The high-pressure system also prevents cloud formation, leading to more intensely sunny days, less shade, and lower rainfall. Now, heat domes also recycle heat as warmer air heats up, leading to steadily increasing temperatures. Now, while heat domes are a natural part of weather, human-caused climate change has increased their frequency and intensity. The burning of fossil fuels, deforestation are all reasons for the increased concentration of heat-trapping gases in Earth's atmosphere. Public health experts suggest that people stay well hydrated and also to try to find some shade or access to air conditioning. They also warn that heat domes make cooling off at night more challenging, as increased humidity will add to heat stress. And on that note, it's time to wrap up Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Now, for our Singapore audience, do stay on for highlights from the FIFA World Cup matches. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
The Samurai Blue came close to slaying a South American giant in Houston as Japan posed a big problem for Brazil in the round of 32 match, taking the lead in the 29th minute. Kaishu Sano slicing through the Brazilian defense to score his first for his country. But Salação struck back in the 56th minute off a Casemiro header. And Brazilian pressure then produced the winner deep into injury time. Gabriel Martinelli firing in to make it 2-1, sending Brazil to the round of 16 and Japan back home. Paraguay pulled off a shock victory in Boston, knocking Germany out of the World Cup. The Paraguayans took a surprise lead in the 42nd minute, Julio Enciso with the header. The German giants struck back in the 54th minute through Kai Havertz, 1-1. And that's how it stayed through full time and extra time as the match went to penalties, where the sides were remained level until Jonathan Tah blazed his spot kick over. Jose Canales slotted in to pull off the offset win for Paraguay as Germany crashed out. Also out of the World Cup are the Netherlands, who took a 72nd minute lead against Morocco in Monterrey in their last 32 clash. Cody Gakpo on target, on the pitch, having found out he and his partner had lost their unborn son during pregnancy over the weekend. The Atlas Lions bit back, Issa Diop equalizing the first minute of injury time to send the match to extra time. The Moroccans came closest to sealing the game in the additional 30 minutes, but the Dutch held on for penalties, where Morocco's breakout star of the tournament, Ismail Saibari, was on target to send the Atlas Lions through to the last 16, where they play Canada next.